All right, our message this morning, the day hope came down. You'd like to bow your heads and we will have a word. Father in heaven, this morning we want to say thank you for your goodness, for your grace, and for the fact that you decided to become human, to become flesh, and you dwelt among us. You made your home with us. And this morning we recognize that you could have stayed in heaven, you could have stayed there, but you sent Jesus to come to this earth and to be with us. And this morning we pray for a blessing and that you would lead us and guide us to go deeper into a relationship with you. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Many years ago, there was a father who loved his son very, very much. And they shared a common interest in art. The father had a beautiful collection of artwork, so much so that the art world was looking on to see what this man had collected. Because they knew that when he would die, there would be some beautiful artworks that people could buy. And the son came to know the father's business and he came to find good art at good prices, and he would buy things and they would compare their collection. But one day the son was called to war. There was a war, he decided to go and he said, I will go, and he left. The son never made his way home. In the end, he sacrificed his life for the men that was with him. And the man went to Christmas, his first Christmas, without his son. And he was devastated because he loved his son. But on that Christmas morning, someone knocked at the door. And lo and behold, it was a stranger. Someone who introduced himself and said, I knew your son. In fact, I knew him so well because your son was a soldier in the same area where we were fighting. Your son gave up his life for me, and he saved many others before he received his gun wound. He said, I heard so many stories about you. Your son talked about you so much, and he said that you loved art. Well, I am an artist, and I remember your boy so well that I painted a portrait of him, and I thought for Christmas you might like this. Wow, well, that just suddenly put a spin on things, and the man thought, well, at least I have a picture of my son, at least I know how he died, that he died sacrificing himself for other people. And he put up that beautiful painting, but all the other artwork that he had, he thought, that doesn't even matter. The most important painting is the picture of my son. I'll remove all the other stuff. That is the painting I want on my wall. And not long after, the man died, and there was an auction. And all the paintings were out on display, and the bidders were looking at the artwork. They weren't looking at the picture of the son. They were looking at the fancy, important art. But when the person who was there, who set up the auction, he said, all right, we're going to start with the painting of the sun. And everyone looked around and said, oh, who cares about the picture of the sun? We don't know him. What matters? That doesn't matter. Let's get to the good stuff. The man said, no, this was the will of the Father that we start with the Son. How much money? 100? Silence. 50? Silence. Then a neighbour said, all right, I'll give you $10. $10 for the artwork because I knew the man, I knew the son. They said, great, $10, going once, twice, gone. He said, all right, well, the auction's over. And people said, well, how can you say that it's over? We're just getting started. He said, no, because the will of the Father was whoever gets the Son gets it all. In the same way, God the Father has said, when you have Jesus, you have it all. You get it all. You get peace. You get joy. You get eternal life. You get a different life here on earth, and you have the life to come. When you have the Son, you get it all. Jesus came to this world as a little baby. Hope came down to show us the way of God, the way of the kingdom. In the words of C.S. Lewis, it said, once in our world, a stable had something in it that was bigger than our whole world. Think about that. Once in our world, a stable had something in it that was bigger than our whole world. See, the hope that we have in everything we believe in, the reason we sit here today is because we have the Son. We understand that our hope rests firmly in Jesus, in his birth, in his life, in his death, resurrection, and his soon return. I want us to look at the story there in Luke chapter 2. And you have got your Bibles there, or you have a phone, whatever you have, in Luke chapter 2. And it has, we're just going to read verses 1 to 3. If someone has it, you can please read it. Luke chapter 2, verse 1 to 3. We'd love to see some Bibles rustling.
And it came to pass in those days that there went out to the tree in Caesar Augustus, that all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was first made when Cyrenius was governor of Syria. And all went to be taxed, every one into his own city.
Okay, so the story starts with something seemingly very simple, a census. Okay, it's things that we do all the time, you know. Every few years we have to fill out a piece of paper, says all the details about who we are. Joseph and Mary, they knew that for the census they had to return back to their hometown. Wherever you were from, that's where you had to travel to do this census. The other thing I notice about the beginning of the story in Luke 2 is that we find the story of Jesus starts with a Roman emperor. Now, in the time of Christ and in the ancient world, emperors were more or less seen as gods. They viewed themselves that way. They viewed themselves as gods, as leaders, as people to be revered. But the way that they led was in a way to show their power and their pride. The story starts with someone who sees themselves as a god, as amazing, as great, as powerful. But the Bible and history shows us that the true God who was here, came as a baby, as something humble, as something almost insignificant. While the emperors would flex their muscles, while they were there to show their power and their pride, Jesus came humbly as a baby. He could have come as someone powerful. He could have come as someone great, but he didn't. He came as someone who depended on others. He came as a baby. You know, the gods or the leaders of this world reveal themselves by pride and thirst for power. The God of the universe reveals himself by humility, grace, and forgiveness. They were about the love of power, while Jesus was about the power of love. You see the difference? Earthly kingdom, love of power. Godly kingdom, power of love. A commentary said this: in the ancient world, if anyone had asked if there was a more important person than Caesar, the emperor and ruler of the vast Roman Empire, the answer surely would have been no. Yet it is the birth of a little boy in a rural Judean village that causes the angels to launch into praise. It's the little baby who brings about the praise of all of heaven. I'm going to read on this, just verses 4 and 5. If someone can read Luke 2, verse 4 and 5.
Joseph also went up from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth into Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, who he registered with Mary, his betrothed wife, who was with child.
Okay, sometimes we read it and we just go over this, okay, and we just kind of, just glimpse past it. They had to go back to Bethlehem. Why was Bethlehem well known? What's important about Bethlehem? Any stories in Scripture, anything that's important? Okay, yes, Joseph is coming from the line of David. This is the hometown of David. What else? Anything else?
That's where the Messiah was from.
That's right. Micah chapter 5, verse 2 says that out of Bethlehem would come the ruler of all Israel, all the world, the Savior would come. There's actually a lot that's tied to Bethlehem. You know, Rachel, when she died, she was buried in Bethlehem. Out of Bethlehem, we see the story of Naomi and her husband, who were from there as well, righteous people. So Bethlehem has a rich history of godly people. But most important, it is where it was prophesied that Jesus would be born. Do you know the meaning of the word Bethlehem? It means the house of bread. We'll come back to that in a minute. House of bread. How many of us love bread? A few hands. Okay. All right, if you talk to my mother, she will say a meal is not complete unless there is bread on the table. There has to be bread on the table. And if you look at every culture has a form of bread. Mediterranean people, they have their versions of bread. Indians have about 7 types of bread. The Japanese have about 4 types of bread. There are so many different breads, and I looked up on Google how many varieties of bread there may exist. Now, this is coming from Google, so we don't know if it's actually true or not, but it says bread in some shape or form has existed as a staple food in most cultures, and it remains one of the most widely consumed foods in the world, with at least more than 100 different types of bread available from around the globe. I actually think there's more than that, but that says at least 100 varieties. When we talk about survival, we talk about bread and water. We talk about the importance that people need food, and that food is represented by bread and something to drink, water. Bread is so essential to life. And I don't think it's an accident that Jesus is born in the place which is the house of bread. Think about it. In John 6, verse 35, he says, I am the bread of life. The house of bread contained the bread of life.